You're listening to Truth Talk, real talk, real faith. Each week, we take on some of the biggest questions and challenges facing Christians today. We'll unpack mysteries from the Bible, examine how they relate to historical discoveries, and connect everything to what's happening right now. Stick with us as we journey through biblical history, connect our faith to the world around us, and address the questions that matter most.
Hello, and welcome back to Truth Talk. Real talk, real faith. We are excited to be with you again this evening. So I'm Mandy Gordon.
And I'm Bruce Gordon.
And, of course, we have Dale Lackey, our producer, with us.
Hello.
Look, sometimes he'll come on and
Someone
step up.
told me last time, one of our listeners told me I need to turn my mic up a little bit louder, so that's what I'm doing tonight.
There we go. Try to get Dale to step up to the mic sometimes so we can get his input and at least everybody know he's a real person working behind the scenes.
Makes all this happen. Without him, we wouldn't be doing
That's
this.
what we were talking about in choir practice last night. So we are going to have our episode, and really, it's been a slowish-ish news week. It's just kind of the same news cycle.
We're still stuck in that government shutdown cycle. Of course, we also have President Trump off in the Far East dealing with some things, but really that's yet nothing to talk about.
More tariff talk.
Yeah, so here we go.
So I really, as I was thinking this weekend about, what you and I could sit down and discuss as our current event, I got to thinking about the hurricane down below Jamaica, Hurricane Melissa, really just blew up, like strengthened so quickly, which they had been talking about. It was, it had been hanging out there for a couple of weeks. I mean, it's very slow crawl across the Atlantic and everything. But then this weekend, it just seemed like it went from a tropical storm to a major hurricane just so quickly.
Major hurricane.
So I thought we would talk about that as our kind of current event, and really from the perspective, Hurricane Melissa is expected, if it hits at either a strong Cat 4 or Cat 5, and right now it's looking like it could be a Cat 5, going to hit Jamaica, and is going to bring catastrophic damage to the island, as well as the other islands, Haiti, Hispaniola, Cuba, all these other islands around it. And, that area of the world is just already poverty-stricken.
Right.
And so, the need for Christian communities to commit some resources to helping them is going to be great.
Right. And the good thing is there are folks already on the way, positioned to be of help. And of the islands you was talking about, Haiti has already been devastated, and then, of course, with really no government in place.
I mean, they're run by these mercenary groups that just wander the island.
Just gangs.
Yeah, and they just kill people left and right. If you don't give them what they want, they stab you to death. And that's what kills me. These guys with machetes, basically. And now some of them do have some automatic weaponry and everything, but for the most part, in Haiti, it's just these guys with machetes. I follow a Christian ministry down in Haiti, and 2 years. It's been 2 years now since those missionaries were killed.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been at least that long.
I think it's only been 2 years though.
Right.
I think it was the spring a couple years ago, where very young couple were
kidnapped. Killed.
No, they weren't kidnapped. They came into the compound and killed them.
That's right.
They went out. The guy went out and tried to reason with it. Anyway, it's the representative from Oklahoma or some Midwest state. It was his daughter and son-in-law.
Right.
I remember them having to work very diligently to bring their bodies home. So that's the kind of situation that some of these places are in. There's no real government resources. Haiti's already one time in the past few years, and by few years, that could be 10 or 15 years in my opinion, was in the news for receiving hurricane relief, and people gave to this good cause, but the people that needed it didn't get it. These gangs got it. These these corrupt government, quote unquote, officials just did whatever they wanted to with the money. So that's why, for one thing, it's super important to utilize respectable ministries, respectable, don't give, and I hate to say this because it just sounds awful, but like your Live Aids, your celebrities that have these charity donations, your money ain't going nowhere with those.
Their intention, their heart may be good,
right?
But they don't have the infrastructure or the ability to make sure that goes where it's supposed to go.
That's right.
And so you need to stay with your proven entities that have done this work for years and years and years and know how to get it done. The other thing I'd say is this sort of falls into what you and I talked about before, is we can't let our hearts get hardened against these folks, because they are people, most of them just poor, destitute people that have been cast in this circumstance. And so just like we sometimes look and see that person alongside the road with the sign, it's easy to turn the other way. But that's not what our heart ought to be at, especially in these cases.
Right. And even a country like Jamaica, who's not quite as desperate and destitute as Haiti, they're completely dependent on tourism for the most part. I mean, they're a waterlocked country who are completely dependent on tourism. And if the island takes the hit that is expected, it's going to be a while before cruise ships can get in there. And like, I could just imagine in like Montego Bay, that's a huge stop for like cruise ships and things like that. They're going to, I can't imagine their ports would survive, some of this impact that's going on. Apparently it has been a long time since Jamaica has been hit.
Which seems odd where it sits.
That's right.
And it'll depend on which side of the hurricane that hits the island. If it wobbles a little one way or the other, may help some. I don't think it's going to help.
It's so massive right now. Like the whole island's covered up by the cone, right now. And then it's just such a massive hurricane that and they said really it's moving so slow that the rainfall is going to be huge too. Even though it's a island, it's very mountainous. And so this rain is going to pour and it's going to cause mudslides, which is going to come down on these villages that are at the base, and everything. So there's multiple issues caught up in this one system, and it's going to be bad. Unless God were to, like, in a divine way, put his hand out and calm that storm, it's going to be devastating for those people. And we need to be ready to respond in Christian love and fellowship, because, and the loss of life has the potential to be great. There's only so much high ground people can get to in a storm. If it's mountainous and there's no like buildings for people to hide in, where do you go?
If you go to the mountains, it could wash you down.
Right. There's tons and tons of Americans trapped because they quit flying out of there yesterday. I'm not really sure why they halted airplane travel yesterday, when it's tomorrow that it's not going to hit until, I know they have to change courses and they have to do all this kind of stuff, but there's a family from Sylvester stuck in Jamaica. I saw it posted today, and I don't know if they still live here or not. But I know that the daughter in the post was a student at Worth County High School at one time, because a couple of teachers posted, "Please pray for this family. They're stuck in Jamaica." So there are a ton of people traveling, and I saw some criticism online yesterday. You knew it was coming. You had time to plan. Look, this did not blow up until this weekend.
Right. And you can plan all you want to. If the airlines or however you were planning on getting off do not cooperate, your plans will go astray quickly. Right.
And, when you're on vacation, you're not paying attention to the news. You're not paying. So these people had no idea how quickly the weather situation was changing. And like I said, I don't know why they stopped flying Saturday out of Jamaica, because the lady, I think they're staying in the Montego Bay area, and she was saying it's been so far has been calm there, so there hadn't really been any issues. So they were like, we don't know why they quit flying planes Saturday, and they were actually trying to get out. Were at the airport trying to get on a plane, and the government shut the planes down, shut the airport down.
Goodness.
So, lots of potential for catastrophic damage, loss of life potential is great. So we really just need to be in prayer.
Where do you go? I mean, that's a small island.
Yeah.
So, comparatively,
it's like a quarter of the size of Cuba.
Yeah.
And
thin, narrow. I mean, it's a barrier island. It'll do what it was intended to do.
That's right.
But unfortunately, the folks on the island are going to bear the consequences.
That's right. There are some charities, if you want to look at ways you can help. There are some charities that we trust. I know that Samaritan's Purse and Georgia Baptist Relief have already been making social media posts about how to pray, what the resources they offer. Samaritan's Purse is everywhere. I mean, I know they've been in Gaza for a while, distributing food, shelter. Their mobile hospital has been there, providing support, medical support to the Gazans and all these refugees. So I'm sure they will as soon. Samaritan's Purse is one of those organizations that as soon as they can get in there, they're making arrangements to get in there because they are trying to meet the need of people.
And they have the equipment to get. They have airplanes.
Yes.
They have the equipment to put on the ground and be up and running quickly.
And their mobile hospital is amazing. I remember seeing pictures of it, and somebody from Samaritan's Purse doing a tour of it online when they set up in New York during COVID. And it is amazing. I was amazed at what they could get done in that mobile hospital. So 8 Days of Hope, that I'm not as familiar with their work if they do anything overseas. I know that they do a lot of work in the United States, in the contiguous United States.
They generally come in behind a disaster, muck out the house, take down any sheetrock that needs to be taken down, and then help rebuild the the property. So,
Right.
So they're not a feeding organization or they're.
But they do that.
Yeah.
I follow a lot of the I follow all these on Facebook. And you just heard me try to pull them up. I was seeing if they were posting anything. They weren't really posting anything about.
I don't know if they oversee.
Yeah, I don't think they do. But if they can figure out a way, they will. So just any of these organizations, though, can put you in contact with other organizations. I know there's Catholic Charities, I think it's called. They do a lot of work. Again, I'm not sure how much they do overseas.
I bet because Catholicism is worldwide, I wouldn't be surprised.
So those are places that I think you can trust where your money's going. And make sure that it's being used to glorify God, to help the people who need it, and to support the folks who are facing this challenge.
I think the passage in the Bible that says if you see your brother in need and you turn a head and don't help, then you're showing that you probably don't have a right heart. And so some of these are our brothers and sisters in Christ there, and they're all the human beings that's going to need a lot of help before it's over.
That's right. So y'all be in prayer for this situation as it unfolds overnight tonight. I mean, unless it has slowed down even more today, they were predicting that early morning hours is when the hurricane should start making its landfall. Early in the day when you can't see, that's always so concerning. Yeah. So
we are recording this on a Monday afternoon.
That's right,
October 27th. So
yes,
if you're listening to some other time,
you won't know. Yeah, So this is Monday night, and so it's supposed to hit early Tuesday morning. So y'all be in prayer for those people. So by the time you're listening to this, it's probably already happened. So be watchful, be looking for ways that you can serve and support the people of Jamaica, Haiti, any of those Hispaniola, any of those islands in the Caribbean that are going to need support and resources in order to come back from
and
this
just
hurricane.
To tag on to that, I don't think it was because of the hurricane, but they had a major tornado on Mexico Beach this morning.
Different storm system.
I think it was the front coming down that caused that. But there was some pretty good damage there. Fortunately, they're in the United States, and they will have a lot of help come their way. But still, there's folks' lives. Once again, I know since Michael and all that happened, it's got to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Especially if you've just got your place back up and running, and some of the businesses, restaurants have just really got back up and running and maybe profitable, and then bang, you have something like that happens.
And tragedy strikes. Yeah, I mean, it's when tragedy strikes, and you take one hit after the others. I know it's got to take an emotional toll on people in that area. Yep. So we are no strangers in this area to natural disasters, and I mean things that
at least hurricanes never come our way.
Dun. Yep. Like we never would have thought it would, except for the last 3 that we've had. Like we had Michael, and then we had the effects of one of them, and then this last one that was cut up a little bit east of us. Helena. Yeah.
Helena, something like that.
I can't remember.
Something in that line.
But you started with an H. I know that. Yeah. So, but I mean, that was another. I mean, we were driving to where did we go Friday night? Hazelhurst, and you could really see some of the tree damage. And we commented that was probably because it was a little bit farther east of us, and so just these things happen quickly, but at the same time. You dread, you spent time leading up to it dreading it. So just be in prayer for those people who are facing this week. So, we're going to head into we always kind of make a hard turn when we're going to talk about our archaeology segment. And so why don't we do that now? So I was reading a Facebook post. I follow Scott Stripling, who's with Associates for Biblical Research, and I noticed he had shared a new book that was coming out that he was one of the contributors. It's got like 12 or 14 contributors, and the book is by an academic. So at first I was like, ooh, I need to get this book, and then I printed the abstract, and I was like, maybe not. It's pretty in-depth. I don't know. I wouldn't call it light reading. But it really sounds, I mean, the abstract made it sound super interesting. Dad, maybe you should buy the book and read it and distill the information for me. But the book's called Archaeology, Jesus, and the Gospel of John, What Recent Discoveries Show Us. And it is an academic publication, so it's
not for fun reading. It's for information.
It's for learning.
Right.
So I had to go and sign up to get the abstract PDF so we could read it. And it says, what are you in a program? Are you in a postdoctorate program? I'm like, absolutely not. This is for myself. So that's when I knew. I was like, ooh, we're heading into some deep territory with this. So, but it was really interesting reading this abstract. And I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of context for what the explanation of the book is. And it says that the Gospel of John has been historically excluded from the historical study of Jesus due to its deep theological and spiritual messaging. However, the book contains more archaeological attested content and topographical information than all the other Gospels combined. So I was like, ooh, this is intriguing.
And the reason for that is the first 3 Gospels are synoptic. In other words, they cover a lot of the same material, like 75 and 80% is repeated in a different way or something exactly the same material, where the Gospel of John is all just about new material. So It is not part of what we call the synoptic Gospels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's kind of telling it. He tells the story, but then he's telling what's happening in real time. Right. So you can really use that from an archaeological standpoint to attest to the authenticity of his reports, because John really reads like a report of what Jesus is doing and the work that's being done by the disciples, rather than a narrative, which some of the other Gospels can come across as.
John tells you what his purpose is that you might know that what these things are and be saved. I mean, he tells, so his is evangelistic report rather than a report of here are the details, here's what's happened.
And he's proven that Jesus is the Son of God and the Son of Man.
Right.
So it's written in such a way, it's almost like transcripty of like, so you could use it in a legal way, almost, with that much detail, like that straight eyewitness account and everything. So,
and because of that, a lot of the skeptics have said John probably was written much later, and it was probably compiled by folks, and it wasn't really the Apostle John that wrote it, because he never really says it's never says his name in the book. It just starts in the beginning. What's the Word? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and through it. But you can see John in it, and the earliest of the church fathers that knew John would attest that it was John's writing. So, but we have had a lot of skepticism, and that's why we're going to talk about these archaeological finds prove John was writing it only in the time period that information was available. Right.
So Dale's going to put in our show notes some links that I sent him to some YouTube videos. So this was an academic article that we kind of pulled some of this information from. There is no YouTube video to go. This guy's a researcher. Like I said, he's academia, so he doesn't have an interesting, that I could find, YouTube channel. So I found some supporting videos that reference the same materials, so that, for me, it's really just brings it to life when you can watch a video and you can listen and you see somebody that's in it. So
yeah, most of us are visual people, so
right. And they're not really showing anything in some of these videos, but it's you still interact with it better. So, and we're kind of providing it as our, references for where we get our information. This isn't us making stuff up and everything. We are like researching for this. Although we are a little bit flexible, we're not completely off the cuff and just making stuff up as we go along. So Dale's got those that he'll drop in our show notes. So if you're interested in these type of things, you can go and view them yourself. So one of the ways that that this article by Mr. Anderson, I can't remember his first, I think it was Paul Anderson maybe. Yeah, Paul Anderson makes the case for the historical Jesus is by using these stories that is recorded and how antiquity has evaluated these stories and found them to be true in their excavations. So really interesting to hear about the stone jars in Cana.
Right.
And
in case you're not
familiar
with that, the first the miracles of Jesus recorded in the book of John he has really yet not launched his ministry. He's just in the process of going to do that.
Well, and he tells his mother, "It's not my time yet."
Right. So he's been invited to a wedding, and evidently his mother's somewhat in charge of this wedding, or has a good bit to do with it. By the time they get to a certain point, they've ran out of something to drink, which in that case would have been a type of wine. And that would have been the most embarrassing thing you could possibly do. And so she comes to Jesus and said, do something. And that's when he says, it's not my time. But then he turns around and tells them to fill, I think it was 5, I forget, I have to go back and have to fill some water pots, maybe in 3 water pots up, and they do that. And each water pot, we think of a water pot as a little jar, but it was about 30 gallons.
Yeah,
of water.
And I was one of these YouTube videos. They said they would stand about waist high, to a grown person, so they're not like little. They're not vases, these are
pitchers.
Six pots
of them. Okay,
so
thank you. Dale looked it up for us.
Quick draw over here. He's like Googling away for us.
So they drew a pretty good bit of water. If they're about 30 gallons each, I believe about 180 gallons would wind up, and but pure water. And they washed it, and then he tells them to draw out, and they draw it out, and it's wine. And he takes it to the head of the wedding, and he tastes it, and he said, "You've done good. You've saved the best here to the last." So that's where the stone water pots come in.
So there's there's several things that we can pull out just from this one record in John. It's early in the book of John. And did it say what chapter?
Yes, the second chapter, verses 1 through 11.
Yeah.
That's when it happens.
So there's this thing that, first of all, there were stone jars discovered in Galilee that would fit the record that Galilee has a lot of limestone. So they found limestone jars in Galilee and areas in Galilee where it was obvious cuts had been made to form these larger vessels. So there you have excavation done.
Which means a lot because up until this time, we have a romantic idea of what Galilee was. It was a small fishing village, mud streets, didn't have any of the things, the cosmopolitan like a Jerusalem or Caesarea or some of the areas might have it. And they really questioned when this story came out, could these folks have had stone pots? And that was one of them. So for many years it was questioned, well, maybe this was just a made-up story about Jesus to teach something. But really, what everybody knows, you couldn't have stone pots in an area like Galilee. So here that went for years, and all of a sudden,
oh, look, we've excavated, and here are these cuts in the limestone. So... which, of course, Cana is a separate place within that region, and it was some excavation has proved that it was pretty settled, and that it was a area of some, if not importance, just established people in the area. So think of like your tradespeople, your people who have their businesses. So they're the more successful people in this area. And they note in the paper that the economic status of this region, according to the excavations, have grown from the BCE, which is the before, like the first century before. This person, this is how academic he is. He's not using BC and AD. He's using CE and BCE, which is before Common Era and Common Era. So the rise of these ability to have these functions, these nicer functions and everything is borne out by finding these this first century BCE and first century CE dwellings that have been excavated in this area.
It changed the idea of what this area was like. Well, yes, it was poor, and yes, it may not have been cosmopolitan, but it had developed, especially in some of the areas like Cana and some of the other cities, even Galilee, the region is Galilee. And so, yes, they were the potential, and now we see that it wasn't just a dump out there. There was
you
much
would
going on.
Expect a prophet that is gaining the stature that Jesus is gaining in his initial following, somebody from that area to come to an important event.
Right.
So it's establishing kind of like, this makes sense for the culture at the time.
Getting his creds out there. So, of course, they would come along and say, well, can a prophet come from Galilee? Because it was thought of sort of country bumpkin type idea.
And the use of the stone jars, getting back to the stone jars in this, again, adds that layer of authenticity to it, because this is a Jewish wedding ceremony. And so you would not expect to find other pottery types.
Right.
You find the stone pots because of purification rituals. I didn't really think about it to that extent until I was reading. I was like, you know what? Yes, because pottery is made of mixed materials. And for the Jewish purification ceremonies and something like this, you would never have utilized something made of mixed materials.
And you couldn't even mix wool with cotton. You did not mix materials.
Yeah.
You use a singularity because the Jews had singular been called out and devoted to God. So,
and that's what we as Christians, we need to understand those tiny kind of seems like minuscule, not that important, the difference between regular pottery and the stone jars, like why that was important. Like, I don't know prior to, my past, I've really gotten into my Bible study in the past couple of years, and I don't know prior to that if I would have noticed the difference just reading that. But it automatically jumped out to me when I started reading the paper. And I was like, yeah, of course, because purification laws, they had to be pure and they had to make sure they were clean.
Right.
You know, they were ritually clean for this ceremony. And so they would not have been able to utilize any mixed pottery. So that again is just, that seems like such a minute thing, but we cannot underscore the importance of that understanding and that finding.
Right. It gives credibility to the Old Testament when it tells you how they had to do things and what they could and couldn't do. And then we find that being carried out even 1,000 years later in the New Testament. So that shows that continuity that they had during that day. So that tells us that the reality of what's going on. If we came up and all of a sudden just disregarded these rules that were laid down, and now they were having mixed linen clothes and cotton and wool, and if they were eating catfish and pork and all that, it would throw a flag up there. How can this be?
Right.
But we find it carried out to the letter of the law all the way through.
Yep. And it helps you set the tone for as Jesus interacts with these religious leaders.
You can see why they got so shocked at some things.
Yeah, that they're so focused on following
Rigid.
the law to the nth degree that they can't see that Jesus came to fulfill the law.
Right.
We were talking before we recorded about this mention of the pools at Bethesda with the 5 columns. That's found as well.
Right. And they again, the folks that want to say the Bible's not true said, no, that's not how Romans built pools. These were pools built for folks usually to either bathe in or have a water supply. And said they would build singular pools and they never would have columns around them. And this just would just berate the Bible for having this illustration. And then guess what we found? We found actually 2 areas where pools were. I've been to one of them when we went to Israel, and it still has 1 column there and a place where the other columns were, the portico that was built. And it's a tiered. It starts up higher and then goes down a little lower. It's a 2-tiered pool system. That's the reason you have the columns and the promenade and all that is there. So we that has been unearthed in the last century. That we found out, and then we have another one.
And not only are they mentioned in the Gospel of John, there are separate documents he talks about in this paper, writings in the Qumran, which Qumran is a very well-known site that's been it's been excavated for the past 15, 20 years, and it just richly...
Yeah, Qumran is where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
I'll give you a sort of reference to the...
So it says... some writings found in the Qumran writings also attest to these pools there at Bethesda.
Actually, these pools were in Jerusalem, though the portico pools were in Jerusalem. Jesus heals one man there that had been trying to get up. The water was going to be troubled, and he was healed him. And there's
Siloam.
Yep, Siloam, however you say that, is there in Jerusalem. And then, of course, you have the Bethesda pools and others that they've uncovered.
Yeah.
Again, we forget that archaeology is in its baby stage. Archaeology of the Middle East is in its baby stage. It's really only in the last 2 centuries, century and a half, have we had these findings. And it's amazing. They have yet to have an archaeological find that disproves or says something different than what we find in the Word.
Right. The last thing that we kind of drew out from this was John's detail to crucifixion practices of that first century Roman government. The very details of that bear testimony to those practices changed over time after like the 2nd century.
Ropes were beginning to be used.
Right, instead of spikes.
Right. As a matter of fact, at one time, they even question where there was spikes available during the time of Jesus. That was not a possibility because those type of spikes were not available. Unfortunately for them, archaeology has found spikes during that time period, and I think you're going to lead us to one where they found a man that had been crucified, and he had the spike
still in his heel.
In his heel, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it says that this person, it happened around the time of the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, which would be 70 A.D. Josephus references about 2,000 Jews being crucified in order to motivate the surrender of the city. Mm-hmm. And this spike was still embedded in the heel of his victim, which, again, utilizes that even if use of ropes was common, they were still using 70 years, not even 70 years later, so that'd be 40 years later, still using spikes as a means of driving fear into the hearts of the Jewish people.
Right.
So,
or anybody that opposed Rome, even in Rome, they would crucify folks. And reading on that in the past, they were very good at driving the nails and spikes in. There's a nerve that runs from your ankle up, and they would drive it in so that it would be up against that nerve, and as you moved, that nerve would hit that spike and cause tremendous pain.
Mm-hmm. And all these conclusions, they not only prove the historical accuracy, but it shows you how the Bible is so detailed, because it's not just allowing the author, it's working spiritually through John. The Holy Spirit is working spiritually through John so that hundreds, thousands of years later, archaeology can attest to the actual circumstances, to the authenticity, but it is still allowing for the fulfillment of prophecy. By his wounds we are healed, of the scriptures that are found in Psalm and Zechariah. Just because these things are prophesied and you think that it couldn't be, it's like, does not mean that we've made up these reports. Because that's what they used to say. These authors made up these reports based upon Old Testament stories so that they somehow say it's been fulfilled. Yet here we are 2,000 years later, and archaeology is saying, nope, these eyewitness testimonies are correct, and they have it right.
They're showing that all of these things were possible during that period of time.
That's right. So it's such a fascinating, archaeology is such a, biblical archaeology especially. It's just, I like old stuff anyway. I mean, y'all raised us on, Indiana Jones and all that kind of stuff, and we loved it. And but biblical archaeology is just so fascinating to me, and just it's amazing. It helps your Bible come alive. Right. It allows you to place things, in a way you can understand. That's why I like watching the YouTube videos and everything, so that you can make these connections, and so you see your Bible's not a book of fables, fairy tales, and everything.
Get you out of that land far, far away.
That's right. One of the YouTube videos is from Joel Kramer. We mentioned him on last week's episode. He has a YouTube channel called Expedition Bible. It's great. Highly recommend it. It's one of those I follow. And it's just great information. So our final segment, we are going to kind of wrap back around to what we started in our first segment. So as we get to our hard question, I was thinking about this as we talked about Hurricane Melissa and the impacts that people are about to face. How I was listening to a podcast last week as well, and I added the link on my Facebook page and kind of puts a little bit of commentary, but and I called you after I finished watching it because I was just about to cry during the episode because it was just so moving, and the faithfulness of this couple is so moving. But I was listening to a podcast last week on the Compelled podcast, and the name of the episode was Life After Trauma, and it was with Doug and Selah Helms, and it was the story of their almost 18-year-old son being in a tragic car accident, and he had traumatic brain injury from that accident. And they talk about what life was like, in the initial hours, days, weeks, and months after Peter's accident, and just how they didn't know how to pray. They didn't know what to pray for. Here's their child who's being kept alive by all these machines. And it felt selfish to say, oh God, we don't want to have him to have to, it's a great episode. If you ever just, want to have a heart for somebody and look at the grace that the Lord will give people to deal with tragedy, I highly recommend going and listening to that podcast. But then we got into this weekend. We talked about it Friday a little bit on our trip down over to Hazelhurst. And then as we walked through the weekend, here we have Melissa, and we're expecting this catastrophic damage and people losing their homes, losing their livelihoods. More than likely, the loss of life could be great. And, how are we as Christians to respond to grief and tragedy? And, I think we do a lot of lip service to Christians. Oh, well, we know our home is in heaven, so we can just bear blah, 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 and that's just, to me, it's a slap in the face to people who are dealing with grief.
Right. It may be true, but now's not the time to talk about it. That's when a person passes away and your heart is broken, and somebody comes along and tells you, well, they're better off now. Well, they may be, but you're not better off. Right. And it takes some time.
You'll see them again one day. Well, that doesn't ease the hurt.
No.
Yes, it gives you hope for the Christian, but there is still so much grief in that, especially the more sudden. I mean, you can't ever really. I handle funerals real good up until we get to a graveside. Mm-hmm. Anytime you get to a graveside and you're never going to look on that person's face again, except through pictures, I'll get choked up right now talking about it, because you are forever separated from that person. It's one. You look at parents who go to the visitation of their loved one, and they can still touch their hands, they can still touch their face, but you close that coffin, that lid, and you put that coffin in the ground, and you put that dirt on top of that coffin. That's it. There's no more physical contact with that person that you have loved all your life, and could possibly all their life, depending upon the relationship to the person. So,
and all the telling that person about, well, it's not going to be long, you'll see them, and because that's at that moment it's final at that
That's
moment.
Right.
It's going to take some time to be able to get, and we need to recognize that and give people time and give them the grace, and just love on them and be real to them.
And honestly, that response is not biblical. Right. If we go back through the stories of that are offered, and I hate saying stories because it makes it seem like it's fictional, but there are stories that are true. So, but if you go back to the literature that is given to us in the Bible and the recordings of Scripture, and we have a whole book called Lamentations. Holy lament, is a righteous action. Before God, we are laying our lamentations. And we see David time after time, especially at the death of his young son. And then as he's being chased and as he's dealing with the consequences of his sin, we see David time after time just laying his heart out, grieving, recording this for our good, but he doesn't suck it up and I'm a king and I've got to deal with it, because he comes before God and lays his heart before God and cries out and asks God to help him through this circumstance, whatever it is. And
even Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus, and I know there's other things going on there, but at its base part, he sheds tears. He weeps there for the heartbreak of Mary and Martha and for the loss, at least temporarily. In this case, real temporary.
He does that knowing he will raise Lazarus, but he still takes the time to grieve the separation.
So the Bible says we ought not to sorrow as those that have no hope. It doesn't say you ought not to sorrow.
That's right.
It goes on and says, as those. So he says, let your sorrow be the correct godly sorrow. And that will bring you to the place of recognition of God's ultimate sovereignty and that He is at work and what's going on. Don't discount that. Let that godly sorrow produce in you what it's supposed to produce.
And that's what, when the Apostle Paul talks later about, this should produce endurance for us. Mm-hmm. It should produce a holy outlook that allows us to be completely reliant on God, and that we may endure until He takes us home. And that's the whole thing about running the race. And sometimes Paul's talking about his current affliction, but it's applicable to any trial or test or suffering that you come up underneath, so that God will perfect. We don't spend a lot of time talking about what He attaining that perfection. We'll never be perfect, but God is trying to perfect in our lives our response to His plan.
He's chiseling off those things that separate us from Him, and sometimes a chisel is harsh.
That's right.
But we have to realize whose hands the chisel is in and surrender to that. And that's, again, words that are easier said than done.
And we have to take our time to come through that. God wants to work with us through our grief so that we can come to that realization, that we do have a hope. We have a hope that's anchored in the promises that we have seen fulfilled over and over again in the Bible, but it's also based upon the character of God. He is who He says He is. So He will not have us be brought through times of grief without seeing us to the other side of that grief. And sometimes the other side of that grief happens in eternity.
Yeah,
it doesn't happen here on earth for us. We may spend, I just think about my dear friends. You wouldn't think at 48 that I have the number of friends that I have who have lost their children. Mm. I cannot count on one hand. It would take both of my hands for me to count my friends who are my age or right within my generation, who have lost their children. And that is just, so that faith is not going to be realized here this side of heaven. But what God promises that, because my character is good and my character is perfect and my character, promises you that you will come out the other side. Sometimes that other side is in heaven.
Even in the case that we were talking about to begin with this young man is now in his state, he doesn't affect the world. He's just there. But he is affecting the folks in the world around him, and they are being changed by him. So we get to the point in all this, what is a valuable life?
Right.
Well, our world says if it's productive, if it's doing this, if it's active, if it has this wealth. But that's not how God looks at life. Mm-hmm. That young man's life is just as valuable to God, because God is working some eternal value out. And I think by listening to his parents, though they still hurt and they have had to, by faith, draw closer to God just to get through this.
When they talk about the joy he brings to other people, and he is, now he can get out and about. So he's in his 30s. It's been 15 years since his accident. And so he's been completely dependent. When he came home, he still had to wear the vest that helps your lungs move so you don't get that atrophy in your lungs. Mm-hmm. And he was on vent somewhat. He was really not cognitively active. They could see brain activity, so he's never been clinically brain dead, but he just wasn't interacting with the world. His eyes would track movement somewhat. But now they say you see the spark in his eyes, and you see him watch what happens around him, and it brings them such joy to see his happiness. They say when they've been gone for a long time from the house and they come back in, his eyes light up when his parents come in the room. I mean, it's just, y'all, if you do nothing else this week, please go listen to that episode of Compelled. It is inspiring. It is, we think life is only important if you can do something with it, if you can tell what you do with it and everything. But man, the joy that Peter has brought to his parents, that he said he's taught our other children's lives how to deal with with disabilities and their grandchildren that have been born since then. It's given them a heart for people with disability and how to comfortably interact, which is something we should all strive to do, because if you're alive, if you're living and breathing, you are children of God, you're made in God's image, and we should not treat anyone as second-class citizens.
All have the same value.
That's right.
Maybe not all can do the same things, but all have the same value.
Mm-hmm. It is really, I just could have bawled during the episode 2 or 3 times, just with the grace that they exude and dealing with trauma and tragedy in their life. And that I would be as able to, I don't know, I get inconvenienced over the slightest of things, and I just get all bent out of shape. And
we say, well, I don't know God, if you're living with him, will give you grace when you need the grace.
That's right.
You may not understand how you can do it now, but when the time comes, then he will give you the grace to
That's
endure.
Right. And we as Christians, when that happens and we're able to glorify God despite that circumstance, that's when you show the world, who God is and what he's done in you, and how you can greatly affect the world around you for the glory of God. Right. Well, we thank you for joining us on this episode of Truth Talk, Real Faith. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach us at connect@abcworth.org. That's connect@abcworth.org. And we look forward to sharing our hearts and current events and everything with you on the next episode of Truth Talk. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope you feel encouraged and equipped. Thank you for joining us as we explored these important topics. We look forward to having you with us again next week